Africa is a natural history series that came out in 2013, and in my opinion, it is one of the best series that the BBC Natural History Unit ever did. So this series deals with, as you'd expect, the continent of Africa. Now when this series came out, going into it, I was a bit like, is it going to be a bit boring? Like, of all the continents on Earth, it's the one that we're most familiar with. We see loads of African animals on screen, elephants, lions, zebras, we've seen them all before, like, a lot. So it's kind of like, is this series going to really offer anything new? But I will say that this series completely surprised me, and I was very impressed with it, and I continue to be impressed with it all these years later. So the series is broken up geographically, with each episode dealing with a different part of Africa and a different habitat. This episode is called the Kalahari, and it deals with mainly the southern Africa, and particularly the Kalahari and the Namib Deserts. And we open up with a big montage of the series. Abra pops up a couple times. It looks really good, you get a sense of what you're going to watch. It does feel a bit different from what you're kind of expecting, so that's good. Sets you up for what the series is going to be like. And the first main bit of footage we get features drongos. So drongos are a type of bird that you get in southern Africa, and they're not one that get a lot of love in these series. I don't think I'd ever heard of drongos before this sequence, and this sequence is a very good way of opening the series, I think, for a number of reasons. The fact that it's an animal you don't see very often, and the fact that it's doing something that you don't really expect, really set the tone for what the rest of the series is going to be like. You see a lot of meerkats milling about as well, and you see the drongo helps the meerkats out. It calls out when eagles appear, so the sentry meerkat's able to alert everyone else, and they're able to duck below cover. However, the drongo uses that to its favour, and it'll make false calls to steal grubs that have been dug up by the meerkats, and that's cool, but the meerkats eventually catch on. They're like, we're not falling for that again, so the drongo actually impersonates the sentry meerkat, so it's able to keep doing the same thing. That's really impressive. Again, a bird you don't see very often doing something really cool, and it's just a really cool thing. It goes to show that some of the most interesting stories in nature involve animals that we've never even heard of, and that's really good. And that transitions very well into the leopard sequence. The leopard sequence is pretty good. It's basically a young leopard. He's out trying to make a kill. He's not really successful, so he starts trying to steal his mum's. It's quite a fun sequence. Again, not as interesting as the drongo, but it does help show you that we are going to see familiar animals. The best shot in that sequence is this little ground squirrel that just drops its nut looking at the leopard with its mouth agape. It's amazing. That is probably up there with the capybara with its mouth open in Planet Earth 2. As a shot that's just amazing, and it's been shown a few times in other series, which usually annoys me, but not really with that one. It's just really good. And then we look at ostriches, another pretty iconic animal. We see there's all these little ostrich chicks. They're trying to find water in the desert. It's not an easy thing to do, but they eventually find a waterhole. When there's loads of animals at this waterhole, the waterhole sequence is pretty cool. It basically epitomizes what is really impressive about the African continent. You see loads of animals. You've got zebra, you've got oryx, gazelle, elephants. The most iconic shot of the series is in that sequence where you've got this elephant that's centre stage with all the antelope below it. It's very good. It's been used again in other series like Planet Earth 2, and it does annoy me when they do that, because that shot is a quintessential part of this series. It basically epitomises what's so good about this series. But we see in the waterhole there's other animals there as well. Lions, they scare a lot of things off, which is good for the ostrich because they're able to get in and get a drink because they're not, ideal prey for lions. And that's a good sequence again. It's very good. And that transitions very well into the black rhino sequence. What I will say about this episode, and the first half especially, is that every sequence transitions into the next pretty flawlessly. Like the drongo sequence transitions into the leopards, the ostrich into the black rhinos. It's really good. It's really well edited. I don't say that a lot about these series, but the editing in this episode is pretty tight. And the black rhino sequence is great. You don't get a lot of black rhino sequences in series. You don't actually get that many rhino sequences for some reason, even though they're pretty iconic animals. The black rhino sequence here is pretty great though. It's mainly filmed at night, and because rhinos, and black rhinos in particular, are known to be pretty solitary animals, this sequence really challenged that notion though. We see the rhinos interacting. It's really good. They're kind of tender with each other. You hear them making kind of, soft calls to each other. The mating of the rhinos is great as well. You see males trying to court females. You see this one that's ended up with an antelope skull on its head. Like, no real context as to how it got there. And while it's quite funny, it actually attracts the female. However, he's not able to, complete the task at hand. That's a really good sequence. At the time, I was very surprised that rhinos actually interacted. And it goes to show you that while we think we know everything about all the animals in Africa, there's so many more things, even about animals that we know pretty well, to uncover. So I thought that was really cool. Again, that's a pretty great sequence in this episode. One of the highlights for me, for sure. And then we move into other parts of the Kalahari. We talk about red-billed quail, which are the most abundant birds on Earth. That's, worth talking about for sure. We see them nesting, and then they are attacked basically by these ground crickets, and these crickets are pretty freaky. Like, grasshoppers look quite unsettling anyway, I think, but the fact that they eat plants, you're like, okay, they're not that creepy. These ones though, they definitely eat meat. They look scary, they look creepy. If you don't like insects, this is definitely going to unsettle you. We see them climbing into the quail nests and try to eat the chicks. The adults are able to drag them out. However, the crickets then squirt their blood at them, which is, pretty extreme and quite irritating for the quailias. They're still able to knock them to the ground though, and because that cricket squirted his blood out and still smells of blood, it attracts the other crickets, which then just cannibalize it. Like, again, if you didn't think these crickets were creepy enough, they actually eat each other. Like, it's a pretty creepy sequence. It's still great though. I mean, it's pretty unsettling, but it's a pretty fantastic sequence. Again, another animal you'd never heard of before that will haunt your nightmares. Pretty creepy stuff and pretty good stuff as well. We then see this cave. It's called the Dragon's Breath Cave. It was unexplored until relatively recently, before this series came out, and it's pretty cool. You see these weird catfish in there that are blind. Again, cave sequences are always great. This isn't a particularly extensive one, but it's pretty cool. I really like that as well. And then we go to the Namib Desert, which is the oldest desert in the world. And here we see this wasp. It's a little parasitic wasp, and wasps are pretty much, always the bad guys in these things. And that is absolutely the case here. We see it digging out a trapdoor spider, which is then going to paralyze and, inject its young into it, which are then obviously going to, live within the spider and eat it from the inside. Pretty horrific stuff. And even though the spider's pretty scary and pretty big compared to the wasp, you're definitely on its side. And this spider is actually able to turn itself into a little wheel and roll down the dune away from the wasp. Really cool stuff. It's called the golden wheel spider, which makes sense. It goes to show you that even the little animals are pretty impressive as well. And the last major bit of footage we get here involves giraffes. So this is the most iconic sequence from the episode. It's probably one of the most, if not the most iconic sequence from the series. We see giraffes in the desert. They're kind of all congregated around this little patch of green in the desert, and this one old male kind of controls it all. We're kind of rooting for him, and we see this young male comes in and he wants to take his territory, and then they fight. So giraffes fighting is impressive. Like, I've seen it in real life and it's pretty cool. This is the best example of it though. It's been filmed a couple times, but this is by far the best. In fact, I'd go as far to say that this is the definitive giraffe sequence we've ever seen in any series, including things like, like the lions hunting them in Planet Earth 2. When you think of definitive sequences for an animal, especially one that is well known as giraffes, it's usually quite hard to pick one, but this is definitely one of the times where I'm like, no, this is the giraffe sequence. We see these two males fighting, and it's pretty epic. It's in slow motion, so you get a really good sense of the scale of this fight, and it's pretty brutal. We see one male's going for the belly, the other one for the legs. The young male is able to knock the old one over, which you're kind of like, no, we want that male to get back up. And it looks like all's lost. This young male's going to deliver the final blow to take him out. He's going to be banished into the deserts, but no, at the last moment he ducks his head down and whacks this male in the belly, knocking him over. And that sequence of the young male falling over is in such slow motion, you get every kind of detail of it. Like, the way his long neck goes down in a sequence is great. It's pretty amazing, and the young male's banished because, despite the fact it's an innocent animal, we're definitely rooting against it. That was a great sequence. Again, what a tremendous bit of footage. It's great. As I've said, it's the quintessential giraffe sequence. Hard to top that. It is the best part of the episode for me, and it's probably the best part of the series. I'd have to, check when I'm rewatching this, but it's pretty hard to top. Great sequence, great way of ending the episode. And then we get the diaries, which is all about the people filming the giraffes and the rhinos as well. Every diary sequence in this series is split in half, which I think is pretty good. The giraffe bit's kind of an interview about the guy that filmed that, which is, it's fine. It's pretty cool. I think the diary sequence was originally meant to be about the rhinos. However, the giraffe sequence was so cool that they kind of went, right, we better talk about that. So they definitely did, and it was worth that. The rhino stuff was pretty cool as well. You saw how surprising it was for them to see the rhinos acting this way. So that was really good as well. I like that. This episode is great. Again, this series is pretty tremendous. As I've said, it's one of my favourites, but this episode is pretty great. But I'm trying to think of the best episode of this series. It's kind of hard to pick one. The first four are all pretty consistent. This might be the best one though. I would need to check as I'm rewatching, but it's in pretty good stead. Highlights, as I've said, the giraffes are the highlights. The rhinos as well are also great. I also like the crickets, the leopards, the drongos, pretty much everything. And this episode's pretty brilliant. So yeah, really good episode. Really strong start to this series. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode, what you think of the series. Let me know. And yeah, I'll be doing the next one next week, which is all about the savannas in East Africa, which again, another pretty big habitat worth talking about. And as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want it. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.